Hello, and welcome to another video from 3.5 Archive. Magical weapons are one of the most exciting parts of a treasure hoard in D&D, and not just a normal +1 sword, but a +1 sword with some kind of special ability that adds something interesting to it. D&D 3.5 had dozens of special abilities for magical weapons, some of which, like the Keen special ability to improve critical hits, became core parts of the game. Other more obscure ones still had their uses. Some, like the Flaming ability, embodied classic fantasy archetypes. But not all were created equal. While it was often better to have a magical sword with some abilities than an equivalent one with a higher enhancement bonus, some magic weapon abilities were not worth the enhancement bonus that they cost, making the weapon more expensive for little gain. This list contains the 10 worst magic weapon special abilities in D&D 3.5. All of these special abilities can be found in the Magic Item Compendium or Dungeon Master's Guide unless otherwise noted. At number 10 we have Merciful. Weapons with this special ability from the Dungeon Master's Guide deal an extra 1d6 damage, like flaming and frost weapons do, and you don't have to worry about energy resistances since it's untyped damage. Unfortunately, all the damage the weapon deals is non-lethal. This is at the cost of a +1 bonus. Being able to deal non-lethal damage is nice, and it helps to always have the option to capture enemies instead of killing them. After all, you can always coup de grace them if you change your mind. The problem is that this weapon is completely useless against constructs and undead, which are immune to non-lethal damage, and the latter will definitely show up fairly often in D&D. While you wouldn't want to capture them anyway, it remains that you won't be able to hurt these creatures at all with this weapon, meaning it's a sidearm at best, and for 8,000 gold pieces, it's an expensive sidearm. Maybe just take the loss and deal with the -4 to hit to inflict non-lethal damage with any weapon, or get a sap when you need to do non-lethal. At number 9 we have Body Feeder. The Body Feeder special ability can be found in the Magic Item Compendium on page 30. Whenever such a weapon scores a critical hit, you gain temporary hit points equal to half the damage dealt. They last for 1 minute, and they don't stack with any other temporary hit points, including other critical hits. This might be a nice way to get some extra health to get you through a tough battle, but the issue with this ability isn't the ability itself, it's the cost, which is a +3 bonus. This means a +1 Body Feeder weapon is going to set you back at least 32,000 gold pieces, meaning effectively you're paying 30,000 GP or more for some temporary hit points. While you can get some truly massive critical hits to make yourself very hard to kill, the cost of this ability means that you're ending up way behind in terms of damage output. Something that might get you 15 or 20 temporary hit points outside of truly insane optimized damage builds is not bad, but keep in mind you are giving up the chance to deal an extra 9 damage per hit if you put this on a two-handed weapon and power attack with it. And that's on every attack. Generally speaking, it's better to hit the enemy harder so that the enemy has fewer chances to hit you. An extra 9 to maybe even 45 damage per turn is a lot better and a lot more proactive than 15 or 20 temporary hit points that you can't stack. Admittedly, you could refresh those hit points every turn if you're taking damage, and not all of your iterative attacks will hit, but even if the numbers were equal, it would be better to deal more damage than have more hit points to spare in most cases. That said, the ability has potential, and that keeps it from being further up this list. At number 8, we have Knockback. This special ability comes from page 38 of the Magic Item Compendium, and costs a +1 bonus. You can activate it as a swift action 3 times per day, so that the next time you hit with the weapon that turn, the target has to make a DC 19 Fortitude save, or be pushed back 5 feet. That's it. It can't be done multiple times per round, so this will really only be any good if your enemy is right next to the edge of a cliff. Otherwise, they'll probably 5-foot step right back to where they were when their turn comes around. To make matters worse, this ability only works on creatures of your size or smaller, which makes sense for something like a normal bull rush attempt, but this is a frustrating one here because you're putting 6,000 or more gold pieces into an ability that often won't have much of a useful effect, and this extra limitation just adds insult to injury. It is a magical weapon after all, you'd think that it wouldn't care so much about the creature's size. Being usable on ranged weapons is the only thing saving this ability from being further down on this list. At number 7 we have Ethereal Reaver. The Ethereal Reaver special ability can be found on page 34 of the Magic Item Compendium. For the cost of a +3 bonus, it gives your weapon Ghost Touch, which is a +1 ability cost normally. It also gives the ability to see invisible creatures while wielding it. This is the difference between an 8,000 gold piece weapon and a 32,000 gold piece weapon, meaning you're paying 24,000 gold pieces for the ability to see invisibility, and even more the more enhancement bonus you stack up on this weapon. For reference, according to the magic item rules, a helmet of see invisibility, were such an item to exist, should cost around 8,000 gold. It could make sense for this to cost a +2 bonus, but a +3 bonus is massive for such a small additional benefit, and as a result, the Ethereal Reaver special ability finds its place on the worst magic item abilities out there. At number 6 we have Maiming. The Maiming special ability from page 38 of the Magic Item Compendium gives your weapon extra damage on a critical hit. If it has a +2 or ×2 critical multiplier, it deals an extra 1d6 damage. If it has a ×3 multiplier, it's 2d6, and for a ×4 multiplier, it's an extra 3d6 damage. This is for the price of a +1 bonus. At first, this might not seem bad, but when you take a closer look, you realize that it is actually a pretty bad trade. A +1 enhancement bonus is equal to +2 damage if you turn that bonus to hit into damage with power attack, assuming it's a two-handed weapon. And it's +3 damage if this weapon is two-handed, so you're giving up +3 damage on every attack for +3 damage on your attacks that are critical hits. Even assuming you confirmed every single critical threat you scored, the best you can do is a 30% chance of getting a critical hit with a Keen Scimitar or Falchion. That means you're getting an extra 3.5 damage 30% of the time, instead of an extra 3 damage every time you hit. And while there is a lot of overlap between when you hit and when you threaten a critical hit, it'll never be quite the same. And while a ×3 or ×4 critical weapon seems like a better deal, almost all of these weapons have critical ranges of just 20, meaning that even with improved critical, you'll be dealing with a 10% chance to even get a critical threat in the first place instead of 30%. So, well, you'll be getting 10% of an average of 10 damage on 3d6, which is equivalent to, well, +1 damage on average. That's even worse than a +1 weapon, even if you don't have power attack, considering that that gives you a +1 to hit as well. And keep in mind that all of this requires you to have a character devoting either a feat to improved critical, or some gold to make this weapon keen as well. So overall, maiming weapons cause their wielders to lose out on damage in the long run, and that's what earns them this place on this list. Oh, and one last note, there's a separate maiming ability in the Miniatures Handbook that is far, far better. Why is it named the same thing? Well, the designers and writers for D&D 3.5 didn't always have perfect version control, let's say. At number 5 we have Distance. This special ability is from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and for the cost of a +1 bonus, your weapon's range increment doubles. That's it. This benefit will be costing you 6,000 gold pieces at minimum, and will only escalate as you improve this weapon over time. It might be good on a returning dagger so you can throw it 20 feet instead of 10 without penalty, but daggers don't count as ranged weapons apparently, if you look at the magic item tables, so maybe you can stick this on a dart or javelin. Most bows have sufficient range to do just fine. If this bonus was a flat cost, like an extra 1,000 or 2,000 gold, it could be understood, but it just isn't worth it with the quadratic progression of magic item costs in D&D 3.5. Think about it, you're likely giving up a +1 bonus to avoid a -2 penalty to hit, sometimes, and that sum is not very much. The uses for the distance ability are few and far between, and not worth it in general, unless you want to make a returning distance javelin for a brutal throw build. That's a decent ranged option build, which is pretty much the only thing stopping this ability from being further down on the list. At number 4 we have Resounding. Weapons with this special ability from page 42 of the Magic Item Compendium gives your allies within 30 feet a +1 morale bonus on attack rolls and saving throws each time it hits, lasting 1 round. For a minimum additional cost of 6,000 gold pieces on your weapon, you might as well have skipped this and bought 8 Wands of Bless that would have given your allies the same effect for a longer duration, for every battle you would have fought between levels 1 and 20. Morale bonuses don't stack after all, and this bonus would be eclipsed by better buff spells cast by the cleric anyway before long, or the song of any bard character that happens to be journeying with your party. There is a small chance that there was nobody in your party capable of giving such benefits, in which case this ability might be okay, and that's why it's at number 4 instead of a lot further down the list. At number 3 we have Disarming. The Disarming special ability can be found in the Magic Item Compendium on page 32. For the price of a +2 bonus, you get a weapon that gives you a +2 on disarming attempts, and you cannot be disarmed of it. While the latter ability, being able to flat out prevent a disarm attempt, is rather powerful, the +2 on disarm attempts is just pathetic for the cost of a +2 bonus. That's costing you at least an extra 16,000 gold pieces just for that. And also keep in mind that disarming in D&D is an opposed attack roll, so that +2 on disarm attempts becomes even more meaningless since you just gave up a +2 on all attacks for a +2 on just a few, as well as losing the +2 bonus to damage. Disarming just isn't a strong enough option in D&D 3.5 for this to be worth using. And if you don't want to be disarmed, pick up a Locked Gauntlet. It gives you a +10 against being disarmed, which will be effectively the same as being immune in most situations, and for a price that is 2,000 times cheaper. At number 2 we have Sundering. This ability, from page 44 of the Magic Item Compendium, gives you the equivalent of the improved Sunder feat, as well as a +2 bonus on your sundering checks, and plus 1d6 damage on your sundering attempt. Sundering, or in other words trying to shatter your opponent's weapon, armor, or shield, has never been the best strategy in D&D 3.5. You give up an attack for a chance at breaking the opponent's magical gear, which means less treasure for you later. Yes, it might make it slightly easier to defeat the enemy fighter if you shatter his +4 sword, but it takes away a huge chunk of the reward for the fight. Disarming him is better, and technically easier, with less severe consequences for both of you. This weapon might be great at killing hydras, who require sunder attempts to take out their individual heads and stop them from regenerating dozens of hit points every round, but this really isn't worth a +1 bonus in most cases. You're paying 6,000 gold pieces or more to add this to your weapon in missed enhancement bonuses, and in return you get to lose out on even more gold for a subpar combat option that often isn't even a good way to win a fight. This makes it a bad option for a magic weapon special ability, and its unlikely niche as a hydra slaying weapon is the only thing saving it from being number 1 on this list. As is though, number 1 is going to go to Fear Burst. At number 1 we have Fear Burst. This special ability comes from the Miniatures Handbook. At the cost of a +1 bonus, whenever you get a critical hit with your weapon, they're affected by a Cause Fear spell at will save DC 11. This ability is laughably terrible for several reasons. First of all, a DC 11 will save is not at all difficult to make. Second, a large proportion of monsters are outright immune to fear, meaning they won't be affected at all. And thirdly, a Cause Fear effect is limited to creatures with 5 hit dice or fewer. So by the time you get access to a +2 weapon, you're going to be at a level where you're not going to be fighting very many of those monsters. And fourth, this only triggers on a critical hit, meaning you need this to be a keen weapon also. So this effect will only work at higher levels where you either have improved critical, at least having a base attack of +8, or having a keen weapon and having it be a +3 weapon, which is going to make it even more expensive and even less likely that you're going to have it at the level where you're fighting monsters with 5 or fewer hit dice. So this effect will only work at higher levels when you hit a low-level enemy with a critical hit, which at that point you probably killed it in one hit and you have no reason or need to make it afraid of you. This ability is borderline useless, and that makes it the worst magic weapon ability in D&D 3.5. So that'll be about it for this top 10 video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Give me any suggestions that you have for other top 10 lists or prestige classes that you'd like to see reviewed on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time here on 3.5 Archive.